Hi, I'm Gina Wells,
Hi, I'm Kat Toon.
and this is the Success Principles Podcast. Michigan is known as the birthplace of Motown, headquarters to the auto industry, and home of the beautiful Great Lakes. The Success Principles Podcast features professionals and entrepreneurs with ties to this great state who have demonstrated innovation and success both within and outside of our Mittens border. Hello, and welcome again to Success Principles. Kat and I have the pleasure of introducing you to Karen Majeske, who is another female who has retired this year after a long, successful career and has done some planning to get there. And she's going to share some of her knowledge about the beginnings of her success principles in Michigan and how she got to be where she is now and the fun things she's going to be doing in retirement. So Karen, welcome.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for being on.
Tell us about your roots in Michigan. Where did you grow up? And a little bit about your high school and college background.
Well, I was born and raised in Lincoln Park, Michigan, called the Downriver area. And when I got married, my husband and I purchased a home 4 months after we got married in Southgate.
Uh-huh.
And then our next home was in Riverview, Michigan. And then 10 years later, we moved to a 5-acre, beautiful home that my husband was the general contractor building it in Huron Township. And then in 2012, we both decided with our children, our son and our daughter, both out of state. One was out of state and one was in his own home, that it was time to downsize. So in 2012, we moved to a smaller home, 2,200 square foot, half the size of the one we moved from. And we're still here. I'm still here and love it. Love the home. But the Michigan winters are just too much.
And so the plan for retirement, Florida?
You're the first person in Michigan to ever say that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I have some immunity issues, and the hardest part with that is I have what's called fibromyalgia, and it's really difficult for us in the cold in the winter. So my husband and I had planned for years that I would retire most likely in 2018 or 2019, and we were going to sell our home and move to Florida. In 2018, I lost my husband and decided to work at least a year longer, and ended up working almost 2 years longer. And then I was ready to retire and move to Florida. So I plan to do that before the end of this year.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, Gary he had his own business as well, your husband, all those years?
No, Gary worked for Ford Motor Company, which became Rouge Steel until the year 2000, when he had a major emergency open heart surgery, and the surgeons declared him medically disabled. Okay. So that was another unexpected life situation that changed our plans to retire in our mid-50s for me to continue to work at least for another 15 years or so.
Right.
That was in the year 2000. So every year after 2015, it was like, well, one more year, because he had more issues that came up, and it just was not a good time to move or for me to retire. So
that's a really big life change. That really throws a wrench in your plans. One theme that keeps coming up with people we talk to when we talk about success is resilience. Is that sense of resilience that you drew from to have to deal with that situation? Was that something you learned over time, or is that inherited?
I had a big responsibility at my job at the time that he became physically disabled. I was running Guardian Alarm, and I was the general manager, and I had over 400 people under me.
Wow.
So I was already, everyone told me how strong I was. I never felt really strong, but I'm not one to stress over things. When there was big issues at work all the time, I would, the employees would come to me all crazy, freaked out that, oh my gosh, this is happening. And I always calm them down. Anything can be fixed. As long as you come and tell me about it, we can fix it. So when he had that emergency open heart surgery, I just kicked into, stronger than I felt I was into gear, because it was really up to me to help him heal both physically and the mental issues he went through, and get my kids. My daughter was still in high school. My son was in college. So get them focused with the whole life change that we had with their dad being not well and home all day. So I was resilient before it happened, and just, I guess, went into a higher mode, that I just do what I needed to do, and kept my cool, because I needed to be strong for my husband and my children.
Right. So what were some of the things? You've been with Guardian Alarm for 40 years, you said, of retirement?
46 years. I started in 1974. I was still in college part-time, and started in 74 as a receptionist and making $3.15 an hour.
Oh.
And quickly realized that that was the profession I wanted to be in, because the alarm business was really just starting to take off in homes. Alarms back then were mostly just common in all businesses and rich people. So, because alarms were very expensive, and as the company at that time, they only had 46 employees. So I decided, this is where I want to be. If I really learn everything I can possibly learn and grow, this company's going to go places. And it was family owned, and it was a father and two sons. And they grew that business from 42 employees when I joined them in 74 to over 700 when they got into the guard. So they had a guard division, and they had an armored car division that they got into later. And then in 98, 99, they decided to start a medical monitoring division. They saw that up and coming. As seniors live longer, they really need that button that you hear on TV, I've fallen and I can't get up.
Oh, yeah.
They were innovators. Excuse me. They were innovators. And at that time, they had well over 700 employees. So through the years, they sold off the armored car company, because a big bank came in and started. That's when all the banks were buying up. The big banks were buying up all the smaller ones. So they approached our company and said, look, we're moving into town and we're buying more banks. And Guardian has them all. So either sell your company to us, or you're going to pretty much lose everything,
Wow.
And they sold it. So
that's an incredible amount of longevity for one company, especially nowadays. It seems like there's, more frequent job hopping. What kept you there for so long? What was it about that company you loved?
What I loved the most was working with the customers, working with the public. That was my heart. So as a receptionist, I talked to all the customers all day long, and realized another small piece of my job was to stuff the paychecks. Back then they were printed. So I would stuff the paychecks sitting at the receptionist desk, and of course you take a peek before you put them in the envelope. I never saw the owners, of course, but I quickly realized that the salespeople, whoa, they made big money. And back then they were all men. There was never such thing as a woman salesperson. And because I took all the phone calls, I also took all the complaints. They didn't return calls. they would embellish on what the customer was getting. And then when the installer got there, it was different. And they didn't, take things head on. So I was always dealing with complaint calls. And there was only 4 salespeople at the time, 3 that was selling to businesses and 1 that was selling to homes. They've got over 40 now. But at that time, it was 4.
40 salespeople.
And right away, I went, I can be better than them. I will never make a customer wait for a return phone call. I will always be truthful and tell them exactly what they're getting. And once they get there, because customers would say, well, once I got my alarm and I never heard from your salesperson again. So I knew what to do to be successful.
That's great.
But it took me from 1974 to when I started there to 1984. And I know that because I waited till my daughter, gave birth to my daughter in 83. So I waited until 84 and started pushing to get into sales. Now, I was pushing before I was expecting my daughter, and they flat out back then would say, a woman will never survive in this industry.
Wow.
And that was the general manager at the time. Now, 20 years later, I took his job. But at the time,
now there's our success principles we're talking about.
Yeah. So at the time, they said, woman won't survive. You'll never do well. And they said, you're not technical. And at the time, the company was holding from 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning in our armored building, which at the time was in Detroit across the street from the alarm building. They were holding classes called Earn and Learn. They needed more installers, but there wasn't any such thing as a school you could go to or a trade to learn how to install alarms. Mm-hmm. So they held their own every morning, 7:30 to 8:30. So I said, how about if I come on my own time, you don't have to pay me, and attend those Earn and Learn technical classes on my own? And they said, do whatever you want. On your own time, yeah, you can join the classes. So there was always 10 to 12 installers in that daily meeting. And of course, I was the only female, and I had to learn to run wire. And at the time, they put the silver tape on the windows, and I had to learn to do that. I had to learn all the technical parts, but I took notes. And after I passed that course, they said, go ahead and try, but you're going to fail. Well, within 6 months, I passed them all up. I was rep of the month every month. Of course, the guys would say, oh, you only get all the orders because you're a woman. Back then, they could say, this was 84, 85. And back then, they could say things like, I always wore really nice suits, but sometimes there's some with a little slit on the side, very small. But they'd say things like, oh, you got your closing suit on. I guess you're closing a big sale today. So they could get away with that. Mm-hmm. But I would win rep of the month every month. And after like 5 months of that and then making excuses, I'd say, hey, guys, just admit it. I'm better than you.
There you go.
I always with my customers, and I don't make promises I can't keep. And I ask them I'm not afraid to ask them for referrals because I did everything and I knew they were happy. And these salespeople didn't have the nerve to ask for a referral because most of their customers got left out in the dirt. So I did so well as a sales. Oh, and my income at the time, I was probably making, when I went into it, maybe $5, maybe $6 an hour. Went in 1 year, I was making over $80,000 a year. And
wow.
They promoted me because I did so well in sales. They promoted me to the manager. And at that time, I had 18 sales reps under me and continued to hire females and mentor them. I mean, I hired men too, because most of the time we would be looking to replace somebody, and we would get 12 to 15 applicants, and maybe 1 was a female, and the other 13, 14 were men. But I also encouraged females from within Guardian that were working in our central station or whatever. I tell them, you would make a really good sales rep. You should think about, joining the team. And so I did that, was the manager until 1994, when my existing general manager, who used to tell me at the time a female could never make it in this industry, he took a job out in Texas. And he retired from Guardian and went out to Texas, and they promoted me. At the time, I was sales manager, then I went to branch manager. And when he left, they promoted me to general manager. So I took his job. He mentored me, though. He was a very, very good manager who was, mentoring me. And I really believe the owners of the company, because the oldest son, who basically did most of the running of the company, he was always in favor of me moving up in the company because he had 2 daughters. And I think he felt that I would be a good role model for his girls, which I was. They joined the company later, and I would, take them under my wing and mentor them and help them grow. And so in 1994, when the general manager left and I was promoted to general manager, I started earning 6 figures. And back then, that was very unusual for a female in that industry. I was always just me. I never carried myself like I was better. Yeah. In fact, I would have managers come up through the company under me, and they would do that. They had this air about them and treat the employees like they were like nothing, not important. And I ended up firing one that was at Guardian 10 years longer than me, and I warned him, you are not going to get away with mistreating the employees now that I'm in charge, because I know the real Fred. And if you can't change your personality and how you treat the employees, you're not going to work here. Yeah. And he was always just mean and condescending. And he actually got big crocodile tears and said, I don't want to lose my job. And I said, well, you have to be kind to the employees. There's never any reason to berate anyone or act like you're better than them or humiliate them in front of their peers in meetings. That's just not going to happen. And he couldn't change because he'd been there so long. And he lasted maybe 2 years after I became general manager, and I let him go. And when I told my general manager who dealt with him, my former general manager, when I told him that I had let Fred go, he was really silent for about 30 seconds. And he said, a man talk, of course. He said, you had the balls to do something I never could do. I knew I needed to.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So it's like cha-ching,
Well, it's Gina and I, this is a predominantly male dominated industry as well. And Gina probably more so than I have encountered, from all angles, either prospective clients or other agents, just people, sort of. Now I think it's a strength. Now I think that it makes us stand out in a sea of.
And I saw years ago it was a strength for me. I did stand out, but I knew my stuff. I wasn't just walking in there, being a small person anyway. I'm only barely 5'3". And of course, the typical blonde hair, blue eyes. So there's always a stigma with that. Always has been my whole life. I had to know my stuff, and I had to be good and gain their trust. And I was in management 10, 15 years later, and I was still getting referral calls from former customers that knew someone that wanted an alarm. So
that's so cool.
That worked out. About 8 years before that, I studied and passed a very difficult national test, and I'm certified as a engineer in alarm company, fire alarms. Fire alarms that a lot of people don't know are for businesses. They are required. If the business is 17,000 square feet or larger, they're required. And in order to to install a fire alarm, you have to submit plans to the fire marshal or the electrical department of the city, and they have to be coded properly. All your spacing is certain spacing required from one smoke to another, when you have to use heat detectors instead of smoke detectors. So it's very, very difficult to understand. And at the time, understand the fire laws and the codes. And at the time, I had asked for a list of all the NICET certified people in Michigan. And I went through the list. It was, at the time, it was probably 18 to 20 pages of people. And I noticed there's no females, not one in the state. So I studied and studied, and I took the test. And in fact, when I had to go to Lawrence Institute of Technology to test for the NICET level 2, I walked into the room, and it was like stadium seating, and there was 50 or 60 people testing. And I walked into the room, and the proctor immediately said, "Excuse me, you're in the wrong room." And I said, "I don't think so. This is the NICET testing." And he said, "Yeah, but I don't think we have you listed." And so he checked my name and looked at the list, and he said, "You're right. You're in whatever row 6 and the 5th seat over." I got to my seat and looked at my packet. We weren't allowed to open them yet. Looked at my packet, and it was addressed to Mr. Karen Majeske.
Wow.
So even the NICET people didn't quite acknowledge that a woman was testing.
Right. What year was that, Karen?
That I got my NICET when I was sales manager, because at the time our owners wanted our salespeople to lay out all their own plans and submit the plans and get them stamped from the fire marshal. And they wanted all of the sales people and managers to be NICET level 2 certified. So at the time, I was managing the salespeople and kept encouraging them to start studying and get ready to take the test. And one salesperson took, because he was a former installer, so he knew I had to learn everything book-wise. I never installed. I just knew book-wise how to do it. So he passed his before I tested, and only about 10 to 12% of people in the country pass this test on the first try.
Wow.
So I got real close, but I did not pass on the first try. Many of our installers and technicians have tested 3 times. I did pass it on the second try, but you have to wait until the following year to test. So I became NICET certified in probably 1989 or 90.
1989, 90.
Yeah.
So not that long ago.
Yeah, and I was the first female. I ended up being the first female in Michigan to be NICET level 2 certified. And 2 years before that, I actually got my Michigan license. It's called a FAST license, and it's Fire Alarm Specialty Technician.
Okay.
And that's in Michigan. You have to be licensed in order to submit plans. But now they've changed the law where you have to earn your NICET level 2 before Michigan will let you test for their test. Back then, NICET wasn't that big in Michigan, so you could test for your Michigan license. So I've been a licensed fire alarm technician since around 91 or 2. And then I got my NICET certification in 93 or 94. And NICET stands for National Industry for Certification in Electronic Engineering. So technically, I'm a fire alarm engineer.
That's great.
And
you were sharing that you could do that in Florida if you wanted to. You could use that wherever.
NICET is a national certification.
Yeah.
So NICET level 2, if I wanted to be a fire alarm inspector, because I worked with all the fire alarm inspectors in Michigan. Once I became general manager, I realized that we didn't really have the alarm industry didn't have a good relationship with the fire alarm inspectors, because they didn't feel that we cared enough to get it right. And sometimes we have to pull permits, but we would fail the inspections several times because the design was bad. So I joined their association. So I joined Oakland County Fire Inspectors Association, Wayne County, and Macomb County. And I would go to their meetings. They'd have them quarterly, but once a year they'd have the tri-county. So all counties would come together. And I always made sure our installation manager and our service manager came, because you develop a relationship with all of them. And as the general manager, I always had a company credit card. So I'd pick up their meetings some of them, the small meetings, they would each be on an individual check. And I would grab the manager at the restaurant, and I'd say, Guardian Alarm's going to pick up their lunch. So then they would announce it, of course, we want to thank Karen Majeske from Guardian Alarm. Guardian has, picked up the entire tab for our lunch. So they're all like, oh, and if they had open bar, because a lot of them, it would be mostly an all day thing. So they'd have an open bar, but their membership would pay for their luncheon. So Guardian would pick up the bar tab, and they
that would be very thankful to a lot of them, I'm sure.
So I just
afford our bar tab, Gina.
I know, right?
And I did the same thing with the police, different police departments, and
cool.
They would invite me as a speaker. In fact, I was paid a few times by the Police Officers Association. They paid for me to go up to Traverse City one year, and they paid for my hotel and all my expenses to be a keynote speaker to talk about alarms. And
good for you.
Yeah,
that's a great career. I know I let you know we're limited to like 25, 30 minutes. So I want you to share a little bit about your exciting news in Florida, what you're going to be doing in your retirement that really is more fun than anything else.
Yes. I had actually 2 job offers for the last year and a half. One was from the former owners, because Guardian sold in 2017 to investors out of New York. And the owner's daughter kept her own office in Lantana, Florida, which is on the other side of the state. And she was offering me a position. In fact, a year ago, they almost bought a large company in Sarasota, and she offered me a really, really good package to move down there if she bought the company. So Gary and I were in, this was probably in 2016, but that fell through. So the other job offer was from my former general manager, who went to Texas, and then he and his wife, she got her occupational therapy license. She was already in her 50s, and they moved to Sarasota. And at the time they had 2 rental condos, and so we kept in touch, and we were friends with them all these years. And now he's got his own website that we're building together. I've joined in a couple of conference calls with the website builders. That is called siestakey.org, and it's the only website that's dedicated only to Siesta Key, which is in Sarasota. There's FloridaRentals.com. There's FindYourFloridaVacation.com. There's a lot of them that are Florida, but none that are Siesta Key only.
Wow.
A lot of people don't know that Siesta Key is almost 100% condos that are privately owned and in the rental program. There's only 2 hotels on the whole island, and they're kind of, like for what people pay, because they don't know the first time they come that mostly all those condos are for rent, and what they pay for those 2 hotels, and they're no beach view, where mine's on the 4th floor. It's got the full view of the Siesta Key Public Beach. And so he wanted me to partner in. We were going to partner in 4 ways, my husband and I, and my friend Paul and his wife Nan. But now that my husband Gary has passed away, it's a 3-way ownership of this website, and he and I are going to build it together. And each condo owner can have their own website on our website, just like TripAdvisor. So TripAdvisor, everybody has their own website, but they pay TripAdvisor to be on it. So with siestakey.org, we will get owners of condos to have their own website on ours, and they will pay us to be on that website. And the better they do renting, the more they will stick with us. So it's up to us to make sure that we're both really, really good at renting our own condos, even though mine's in the rental program. So because we were born and raised sales. So once they see how well their rentals will do with us, they'll continue to stay. So it's a work in progress, but it's going to be a nice kind of part-time job. I don't have to work a lot of hours, and it's mostly just, computer things while we're setting this up. A little bit of networking with the Siesta Key Chamber of Commerce. But he's already been whining and dining them because he owns 9 units on the island. I only own 1. So yeah, so it's going to be it's going to be fun, and I think it's going to do real well.
I think so too. For all the years, for all the years of your perseverance and everything that you've done to get to the top, you really just had a goal and just kept meeting each goal as you got to it. Perseverance, and the way to get to also your retirement was not only did you save in your employer's plan, but you also saved outside and made outside investments.
Yes, I did.
And you kept things on the straight and narrow. So,
that was my advice from my dad in 1975 when Guardian first started the program, that they would match your income. And at the time, I didn't want to do it because what I was making, I needed every penny. And my dad said, you join it and contribute and get that 3% from your company, because retirement comes a lot quicker than you think. You're 22 years old, you think it's way out there, but you need to invest and grow your retirement and plan for it. So I always did. That was always in my goal to continue to save and put away for my retirement.
That's great. And we hope more young people start to realize that they have to save first and then spend later. But it seems like nowadays everybody spends first and thinks about saving later, which is unfortunate with everything that's been going on. But Kat, any other questions you can think of before we wrap up?
No, I'm just really excited for all your retirement adventures.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm going to be listing my home here in Brownstown in the next couple of weeks. I decided to list it on Zillow, and homes are selling so fast in this area that I thought, rather than pay $20,000 to a real estate agent, let me see. I've sold by owner myself before a couple times because I own property and flip houses that my son and my husband and I together, my son did all the work. So we would buy the home for him. And then when he'd sell it, he would get the gain, and he'd use that money to get another one. So I had sold by owner several times. So I know exactly what to do. So I decided, why not? I'm retired. Let me do it.
Well, best of luck. I'm so glad to have had you on the show and for you to have shared your success principles over a long 46-year career, Karen. Congratulations.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to our show. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate that you have taken the time to stop by for a bit.
For more information about the topics we discussed today, there are links in the show notes for your reference. If you'd like to learn more about the Success Principles podcast and about Kat and myself, go to www.successprinciplespodcast.com. Gina Wells is an investment advisor representative of Retirement Wealth Advisors Incorporated, an SEC registered advisor. Success Principles Podcast and RWA are not affiliated. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. This information should not be considered tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with professionals specialized in fields of tax, legal, accounting, or investments regarding the applicability of the information for their situation. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments will fluctuate, and when redeemed may be worth more or less than originally invested.